Welcome to Markup, Tax, and Tip. Here is where we will start to apply some percent practice problems. So we're going to start off with a couple of definitions. Markup is a percentage increase, essentially. Okay, percentage increase. A percentage increase. Usually in the value of something or the cost of something. For example, a store will get a box of cereal and it will have cost the store probably, 50 cents, for example, to buy that box of cereal. But to make money, they're going to mark it up a certain percent and they might sell it to you for $1.50 and increase their profits compared to what they originally bought it for. We will talk about this more when we actually talk about percent change. Oops, that's an R. In another lesson later this week. All right, so tax, as we also discussed in our recent vocabulary lesson, is a percentage. To be clear, we are specifically speaking about sales tax in this particular class. So a percentage on something you buy that goes to a local government. Usually a county or a city. And it is specifically a percentage. For example, in the city and county of San Diego, we have an 8.5% sales tax. So that means that anything you buy that a sales tax applies, they will calculate your total and then they will charge you 8.5% of whatever you paid for. That will go towards the local government to help fund things in that area. Okay. Finally, we have tip. And as I've mentioned for discount in class, tip can sometimes be a flat rate and sometimes it will be a percentage. More often than not, it's a percentage. Okay, so a percentage paid for a service rendered. I do want to discuss briefly that the social norms for tipping a service provider, for example, a server at a restaurant or a stylist who does your hair or other service professionals who are working for tips, there's a variety of social norms for tipping. Outside the United States, there are some countries where it is considered rude to tip. But in the United States, because servers, in particular at restaurants, are paid a very low wage, they often rely on tips. So make sure you are tipping well and that you account for that when you decide to go out to eat, because it is not fair for your service providers, servers, and other people in restaurants to not make their money because of your poor planning. So if you want to go out, if you want to eat something, make sure that you budget for that when you make your selections when you go out to eat. On that note, Jaden buys a baseball for $15 plus 8% tax. What did Jaden pay total? So we're going to talk about tax for a few minutes here first. Jaden buys a baseball for $15. So we have a $15 baseball. Okay. And that is actually going to be our total. We paid $15. And we want to figure out 8% out of 100. Okay. But since I want to find out his total, there are a couple of options here. I do want to point out that a lot of times I will use the percent equation instead of percent proportion for this. So I will show you that after we use the percent proportion. But if I'm trying to find the total, that means he pays the 8% and 100% of the total cost of the baseball. So the $15 plus the 8%. So I'm actually going to help myself out here and mark this as 108% instead of 8 out of 100 because I'm going to have to add that 100%, that $15 back in anyway. Okay. So I have my x there. And now I need to cross multiply or simply multiply both sides by 15, which will make my life easier. Times 15 times 15. And I'm going to simplify. I get x here. 15 and 100 can simplify by 5 at the very least, right? So I get 20 and 3. Okay. Now 108 times 3. And yes, it's going to be a decimal. It's going to be a little more messy than our usual. Okay. So 108 times 3 is going to give me, actually, you know what? Let's go ahead here and simplify that 108 and the 20 first. They're both even, so I can divide by 2. And in this case, I can actually divide by 4. So that'll make it a little more simple. So to divide by 4, I get 5 here. And 108 divided by 4. 4 into 10 goes in 2 times. And then I have 28, which goes in 7 times. So finally, I have 27 times 3 divided by 5. Now, 27 times 3 is 81. 81 over 5 is not going to be a perfect number, and that is okay. But it is going to give us a terminating decimal, so that'll make my life a little bit more simple here. 5 goes in 8 one time. Should be a 5. Sorry, I jumped the gun there. 5 goes into 31 6 times. So I'm going to take away 30. And then I have my 10, which does even out to 2. So I have 16.2, but you'll notice, and if you remember, this is a cost. And cost has to have 2 digits for a decimal because we don't have money in 1 digit. So I'm just going to place a 0 at the end there. The total cost is $16.20. Okay. As promised, I'm going to go back and I'm going to rewrite this in percent equation form. Okay. And the big difference here is that instead of using, instead of using this percent proportion of fractions, basically, I end up using decimals. So instead of 108 over 10, I'm going to put this as 1.08%. Okay? So I'm trying to find 1.08%. 1.08 times 15. And that makes my life a little easier for this whole process moving forward. I want you to try it. Janet buys a football for $20 plus 8% tax. What does Janet spend total? So use the information from the last example and give it a shot. What does Janet spend total? Now, I want you to take it to the next level. So we're going to think about what 2 pieces of information we got in the last 2 examples. So we had that $16.20 from Jaden's. Take whatever you got from Janet's, and remember difference. Think about what operation that means, and you are going to use that there. I am going to give you a hint. If you would like the hint, then go ahead and keep watching the video for a moment. If you don't want the hint, make sure to pause right now so that way you can hold off until you are finished before you hear the hint. And the hint is difference means subtraction. So I'm going to take that $16.20 and I'm going to take the cost of Janet's and I'm going to subtract them. All right, let's take a look at some tip examples. So we have Aaron and his friends go out to eat and spend $25. What amount does Aaron spend on tip? So I am going to point out that tip is going to be customarily 20%. So if he spent $25, I want to know what is the tip. Just the cost of his service tip here, okay? So I have 20% out of 100, x over here. So I can cross multiply again or simply multiply both sides by 25, which is easiest because it cancels that out. And x will equal 20 times 25 divided by 100. 25 divided by 100 is 1 over 4. So I get 20 over 4, and that's $5. Now, helpful little hint for a 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, so on, for tip, especially for 20%, that I personally use, so I don't have to bust out my calculator when I am trying to go out to eat. 10% of a number means I have moved the decimal place one time. 10%, move decimal once to left. If you recall the other day when we were taking a percent and turning it to a decimal, we moved the decimal twice because we were dividing by 100. Here, we're going to just move it to get 10%. So I move it one time, so I get 250. So that's 10% of what Aaron spent on his food. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply that by 2. Now, 250 is a pretty straightforward one. Sometimes it's going to be a little more complicated, so occasionally I'll round before I do this times 2 part. But it makes it pretty simple. Instead of having to set up a whole proportion, you can easily just divide by 10 and then multiply by 2, and that gives you what you're looking for. So 250 times 2 gives us that $5. Now, this doesn't work if you're trying to tip, for example, 18% or 15% or 25%, but for those of you who tip 20%, which is pretty customary in the U.S. at this time, dividing by 10 or moving a decimal one time and then multiplying by 2 will be a really simple way to calculate your tip if you are out in public and don't want to bust your cell phone out while you're trying to make that happen. Another tip example, Fenix spends $15 on dinner. She pays 20% on tip and 8% on tax before the tip. What is the total Fenix spends on her meal? So here I have to calculate a couple of different things and then do some adding at the end. I'm not just trying to find one piece of information. I'm trying to find multiple pieces combined, hence that total there. So $15 on dinner. 20% on tip. So I'm going to use that little trick I just showed you before. Move the decimal one time, I get 1.5 times 2, which is $3. Okay, so this is the tip. Remember, my total is still $15, or my subtotal, I should say, on the food. And then the tax is before tip, okay? So that means I'm going to do 8% before the tip, which means I'm calculating out of 15. So I am going to multiply both sides by 15. And my tax is going to be, I'm going to simplify by 5 times 3, 20. So 8 times 3, which is 24 over 20. But that doesn't really help me understand what's happening here. So I'm going to simplify, and then I'm going to turn this into a decimal, okay? Because when I'm dealing with money, I'm dealing with decimals. So 24 divided by 20, I can simplify by 4. And I get 6 over 5. And then I'm going to divide 6 by 5. Which should give me a number that is over 1, right? 5 goes into 6 one time. But I still have some left. So I'm going to bring that down, and 5 goes into 10 twice. If you recall from the previous practice problem, I pointed out that we have to use 2 digits when we're dealing with our money because it's decimals that have 2 digits for change, okay? The most important thing to remember is if you're doing this on paper, you need to line up your decimal places. So I have 15.00, 3.00, and 1.20 for my totals. When I add everything up, I get 8, 9, And oops, I don't carry a 1. So I have $19.20 is the total that Fennec spent on her meal, including the food, the tip, and the tax. All right, last you try. Rue gets a haircut for $35 and wants to tip the stylist 18%. What is the total cost of Rue's haircut? So please calculate 18% of $35 and tell us what the total cost of Rue's haircut will be. Make sure to get your work checked.